LaPlata is something really, really special, and one of the things that I think can make your trip extra special is if you know the secret of Paradise Meadow. Gary was the brains behind our operation, and our three-man expedition, he had read ahead of time, he'd studied the maps, and he suggested going in early on day one, about 2 miles, setting up camp. Then from there, we would summit the next day, come back to camp, and then come out on day 3. And I gotta tell you, it was a perfect plan. From the parking lot, you head down a dirt road and enter into the trailhead, and the woods there are lovely, filled with aspens and a few pines. And we didn't realize it when we were going in. We thought it was pretty level, but you're actually going down just a little bit as you're going in. We knew it when we were coming out because we were going up at that point. But you get in, you cross a bridge with a rushing orange river. Make sure you go to the right after you cross the bridge, not the left. We headed off to the left first, but there's a sign there that says private property, so we just headed off to the right. And a little bit later, you cross over a creek, and that creek is going to be the water source for you up while you're camping. And as soon as you cross that second creek, that's when things start to get steep. In fact, you go up about 800 feet in the next mile. Now, the entire journey climbing up that steep incline, we saw hikers starting to come down. And we kept asking, are there any places to camp up ahead? And almost to a person, they said, yes, there's a beautiful meadow up at the top of this incline that's worth getting up there for. So we kept on moving onward and upward with our heavy packs. And the last person we saw, we asked the same question. And this guy was a little exhausted and maybe even a little exasperated. And he just shook his head and said, there's nothing level ahead. And he sounded so serious, we believed him. But we kept on because we had evidence from other people and we had a map that said there was something level ahead. Once we got to the top of the stairs in that steep part, it did level off, and it was a beautiful pine forest that we were walking through. And as we were going through that, a little path took off to the right. And perhaps because Gary had done so much homework, perhaps he knew something we didn't know, but it seemed to us that just instinctually, he took off to the right and followed that path. And it led down through some bushes and across a creek, and across that creek was Paradise Meadow. Absolutely stunning, flat, gorgeous meadow at the bottom of a rock slide on that side, and from there you could see up to the LaPlata Peak. It was stunning. Lots of good campsites, lots of fire rings, and we had the place to ourselves, except for the mosquitoes. There were lots of mosquitoes. We set up camp, had a great night there. Next morning, it was a nice leisurely start to our summit. We got up with the sun, we had our coffee, we had our breakfast, we loaded up our smaller packs and headed up the way. We walked through the meadow that everyone was telling us about, and once we got to the other edge of that, things started climbing quite a bit. First, we hit the narrow switchbacks, and the narrow switchbacks you can just see going straight up. It's cut through the trees, so it's a very clear path, and it just goes on and on and on and up. You climb about 400 feet through those switchbacks. And then, before you get to more switchbacks, you enter this area that looks like ancient lands. It's grass and green and these big giant rocks that have been there for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And in fact, one looked like a giant altar there. It was pretty nice feeling. At that point, the sun is starting to come up over the ridge above us and starting to warm things up. We kept going, and then we get to the wider switchbacks, which is much bigger climb, about 700 feet at that point, and you can't really see them, but you kind of know you're cutting back and forth across it. From there, you get to the saddle, and you can start moving towards the summit, and it takes a while to get there. Now, once you start to make that final climb and you start climbing up over the bigger rocks, it gets a little difficult to know where the trail is headed. And in fact, we got lost both on the way up and on the way down. And on the way up, we were sliding quite a bit and slipping on the dust, and we saw this sign that said, "Stay off rehabilitation area." Now, because of where we were situated, when we saw that sign, we thought it meant the other side of where we were. Well, a couple other hikers pointed out, no, it was the side we were on. So we quickly got off that area, got back on trail, and made the climb a little bit easier. Then once we hit started climbing up a little bit, you can tell very clearly, kind of as you're coming up to it, there's going to be a false summit. But once you hit that false summit, it's really kind of a nice little it almost feels like a gravitational pull to just shoot you across over to that main summit. Views up there are stunning, they're gorgeous, unbelievable. So absolutely worth the trip. On the way down, as we kind of hit that area, and you're supposed to go out kind of out to the ridge and then down, we saw some cairns and we went towards those cairns, but very quickly realized we were off trail on the way down. And from that standpoint, we hit some slippery skeet that was kind of tough to get across, and we just kind of cut straight across it trying to get back to the trail because we could see other hikers. Now there were other hikers down below, so we had others that were following that led us that way. But one thing to be mindful of is the false cairns. And if you don't see a very clear path ahead of you, take a step back. I think we were too focused on looking forward and pushing that way, and the part that we missed was really kind of more off to the right, and we probably should have taken a step back and said, or been willing to backtrack a little bit and say which direction we go, as opposed to there's got to be a way to go this way. A couple of key things to keep in mind with LaPlata, and the first one comes from my friend Mark Lynn, who's done several 14ers. Great thing about LaPlata is you got water source. Now it is heavy metal content up there in those waters, so make sure you bring something that filters that out. And but you don't have to carry as much water because you do have access to water sources when you're climbing up the mountain. The other is expect the steep early and the steep late. It's got that nice flat section in the middle, but it's a longer hike, and so prepare for that. In particular, if you're prepping for the afternoon storms that can come up, make sure that you get plenty of time in to be able to hit that and get back out of there okay. But my number one recommendation is do the 2-night camping. Hike in, stay at Paradise Meadows, summit, and then come back down and celebrate at Paradise Meadows with a few nice warm drinks around the campfire, some nice songs, and then casually stroll on out the next day.